Good evening, everyone. So, yesterday was a big day in court for both Robert Tellis and Nicholas Alahverdian, or Nicholas Rossi, or whatever that guy's name is. Robert Tellis was sentenced by the judge yesterday, even though the jury in that case came down and convicted him and gave their suggested sentence. The judge actually has to set the sentencing. So we had the sentencing hearing yesterday. What's up, Trey? Good to see you here. What's up, Jeff? Good seeing you as well. Glad you could join me this evening. Also, in addition to Robert Tellis, you also have Nicholas Alahverdian, who had a hearing yesterday on some motions, and that was quite the interesting hearing. So we're going to dive in a little bit into what's going on with Nicholas Alahverdian, Nicholas Rossi, after we get done with the Robert Tellis sentencing hearing. Now, with respect to the Robert Tellis hearing, Robert Tellis, the judge in that case, essentially has the ability, because he killed somebody over the age of 60, the judge can add time to his sentence, even though the jury has already made a determination as to how long his sentence should be. And I believe the judge could add anywhere from 1 to 8 years, I believe, onto his sentence. And that would lengthen the minimum number of years he has to serve before he's eligible for parole. Alternatively, the judge can add prison time after he's eligible for parole. So essentially, he would serve the initial 20 years and then serve additional time. If the parole board says, all right, you're granted parole, well, then his second sentence would start at that point. And that would be the additional time that the judge imposes. But the judge can't impose both. So you can't stack the sentences, the additional time. It's kind of a one or the other kind of deal. You can't just keep on tacking time under different possible scenarios, such that you're kind of overturning the jury verdict in the case. Hopefully, Natalie brought dinner. I haven't seen her show up yet. Hopefully she's going to join us here soon, and she'll be bringing dinner, hopefully. But without further ado, let's get into the Robert Tellis sentencing hearing. Let me know if you all have trouble hearing or anything like that. And I'm going to play this
is breaking news from Las Vegas Review-Journal.
A little faster
Michael Gaughan, South
than normal.
Casino and Spa.
Soundly rejected all of that. All of the theories offered by Mr. Tellis were rejected by the jury, and the jury was left with the facts and the evidence that have always been there since the beginning of the case. And that is that Mr. Tellis planned this extensively. He drove to Mr. Gehrman's house. He was lying in wait, and he attacked him from a place of...
So I couldn't find any place where this hearing was actually live. But the Las Vegas Review-Journal, and that's the newspaper that Gehrman worked for, actually replayed the hearing later on, but they only played a portion. So we missed the beginning. And we are picking up kind of as the prosecution is stating their case as to how they think he should be sentenced.
Cover. And of course, Mr. Gehrman was 69 years old at the time it occurred. The court knows from the evidence in the trial that the planning was extensive. Mr. Tellis used taxpayer-issued resources to look up personal information about Mr. Gehrman. He scoped out Mr. Gehrman's neighborhood ahead of time, and then of course he attacked someone much older than him by surprise. His reason for doing this, we learned, was that he didn't like what Mr. Gehrman had written about him. He felt that Mr. Gehrman had cost him an elected position. This type of violence, this sort of political violence, because of being upset about an article that has been written about you, is unacceptable and dangerous to our community as a whole. Beyond that, Mr. Gehrman's position as a reporter for decades in Clark County, his death affects the community in a unique way. There are many people who were readers who felt like they knew Mr. Gehrman and relied upon him to supply them with information about various news within Clark County. And finally, and most importantly, the family of Mr. Gehrman lost a beloved family member, an uncle, and a brother. Based on all of these factors, the state respectfully asks for the maximum sentencing enhancement available to the court. We do have one victim speaker.
Thank you. Mr. Tellis, do you wish to address the court?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you.
First of all, I want to say that the family has my deepest condolences. They're, Mr. Duran was, very impactful in the community. He made a difference. And we know from testimony by the family that he was a good brother and a good uncle. And I understand the desire to seek justice and have somebody accountable for this. But I did not kill Mr. Duran. And unfortunately, the people who should be held responsible, who should be brought to justice, the chances of happening now, right this minute, are slim to none.
All right, so right off the bat, right there, Robert Tellis is being given the opportunity to say his piece, and he says, while I feel for the family, I didn't do it. So he's kind of in a catch-22 here, right? Because we all know he wants to appeal this case. For the record, his attorneys have already filed a motion to withdraw as counsel. So in his attempt to appeal, he will not have Mr. Draskovic at his side. But he wants to appeal, which means he can't admit that he did it because that'll kind of mess up the appeal. But he knows that at some point he's going to appeal before the parole board, and they're going to look back at this and they're going to say, even in the trial at your sentencing hearing, you didn't admit to having done it. You showed essentially no remorse for the crime that you committed. So why should we believe you now that you are remorseful at this point? So he's kind of in a catch-22 at this point, but let's keep going.
That said, again, my deepest sympathies to the family, and I wish them well as they navigate the rest of this tragedy.
Thank you very much. Mr. President.
Here, I'll be brief. Your Honor was very attentive through this trial, which was lengthy. The jury was able to hear the state's case, the defense's case, and they ultimately reached their verdict. We're not here to question the verdict this morning. Mr. Tellis exercised his constitutional right to go to trial and to testify, period. That's what makes this country so great, this judicial system where we take cases, we take facts, we take theories of prosecution and defense and present it to a jury. Obviously, the jury was very thorough and careful. It took 3 days to go through everything before they reached their ultimate conclusion. Mr. Tellis was convicted. To punish him for doing that, I'm not anticipating that the court would ever do this, and I'm not saying that Your Honor is, to punish him for exercising his constitutional right is obviously inappropriate. He intends to pursue an appeal. Obviously, again, that's not really for today's discussion. What is his utter lack of criminal history. If you look on page 3 of the pre-sentence investigation report, criminal record, we have a long string of zeros, felonies, gross misdemeanors, prison, jail. He doesn't have any prior convictions. He's not a recidivist, as before this court or others repeatedly being convicted or entering pleas for violent crimes saying, Judge, this time, give me a chance. This time, things will be different. Your Honor heard from his family. He's an exemplary father. He was a good student. He was elected to office. In most part, he was a good husband. We have to look at the entire man. He's been convicted of perhaps the most serious offense. He carries one of the heavy.
All right, so Draskovic is grasping at straws here. So, without a doubt, recidivism is one of the factors that the court should look to. But before he even talked about recidivism, he was talking about things that the court shouldn't look to. The fact that he's going to be appealing, it doesn't matter. The fact that the court shouldn't punish him for having taken the stand, essentially, that shouldn't matter because we don't expect the judges in our court system to take things that are a constitutional right and use it against the person who asserted the right. We don't expect judges to do that. So he shouldn't have even brought those two things up. But then he goes on to say, he was a good husband. Well, we found out in trial that he cheated on his wife. We saw a video of him being arrested after his wife called the police because she was in fear for her life, even though she dropped the charges after that. We did see that. And then we saw that he used her car to go kill somebody, which could have, implicated her in this scheme of his. And that's not necessarily good husband behavior. So I think Mr. Draskovich is grasping at straws here.
Heaviest sentences in our judicial system, the jury elected to give him the opportunity at redemption. There obviously was an element of retribution in the sentence they imposed, but nonetheless they gave him the opportunity to one day be released. What's before your honor is, again, how much above that 20-year sentence will he have to serve before he's eligible for parole. Given his utter lack of criminal history, I would urge the court to sentence him to something less than the maximum. I mean, the maximum sentence, we can't stack these enhancements. I mean, maximum sentence would be an additional 8 to 20 years. I'm going to urge the court to allow the parole board a bit more discretion. I would urge the court to consider a 1 to 10 year enhancement, which is allowable under statute, and allow the parole board to determine when he should be released. Of course, it's a two-step program. Number one, he'd have to be eligible for parole on the murder count, which won't occur until 20 years is served, but then there's the second consecutive sentence that must be served for the enhancements. I would urge the court to impose a sense of leniency in that he has no prior criminal record. Mr. Tellis has been actively engaged in his defense since the get-go. That continues through today. Again, I would urge the court to not hold that against him. And based upon the evidence Your Honor has heard, the statements of the parties, our arguments, and the information contained within the pre-sentence investigation report, which I just want to put on the record, there's no Stockmeyer issues, we submit it to Your Honor's sound discretion.
Okay, thank you very much. Any call the first witness?
Garman?
So Draskovich is asking for he's basically conceding, look, we know you're going to tack on some time here because of the nature of the crime, but please only give him a little bit more time and not a lot. So apparently he could get up to an additional 20 years. So I stand corrected with respect to that. But he's asking for less than that 20. So this is Jay. We heard from him at the trial. So I guess he's about to
swear the testimony
speak again.
action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Can you please state and spell your first and last name for the record?
Sure. Jay German, Jaygerman.
Thank you.
Good morning, Judge. Thank you for allowing me to just talk a little bit. Yeah, we lost a brother. We lost an uncle, a friend, a leader. We're still in shock, and it's been 2 years. And it's going to take a long time to recover from this. It's taken up this whole ordeal, the trial, the crime, the murder. It's taken a big toll on our family, and it's been immense. It's been really difficult for all of us. We're doing our best to get through it. We really are. But he was our leader, and we're never going to see him again, and it's hard to come to that realization. But we're dealing with it. It's just going to take a long process for all of us, to recover. We're struggling with it, but we're doing the best, and we miss him dearly. We really do. We've had a couple of his birthdays since he's passed, and it's nice to get together as a family and, kind of visit with Jeff, but it's not the same, and it never will be. We've lost a lot. He lost a lot. We have a lot of anxiety about the future safety of our family, and the children of our family, if Robert Tellis were to be released after just 20 years of incarceration. But thank you for letting me take a few minutes to talk about Jeff and our family.
Thank you. And thank you for your testimony. Anything else?
Not on behalf of the state.
In accordance with the laws of the state of Nevada, this court does now sentence you as follows. In addition to the administrative assessment, the DNA fee, and the collection fee, you'll be required to submit to genetic marker testing. At this time, the court's going to sentence you to life in the Nevada Department of Corrections with parole eligibility beginning after a minimum of 20 years has been served, and after considering all the factors enumerated in NRS 193.165, the court's going to sentence you to a consecutive 8 to 20 years for the deadly weapon enhancement for an aggregate 28 to life. in the Nevada Department of Corrections. He has 771 days. Does the defense agree with that?
Yes, we do.
Okay, and the restitution, was there any objection to the restitution amount?
No, Your Honor.
And the proposed restitution, the amount of $23,347.71 to the victim's family.
Thank you.
We do have two housekeeping matters. One, there was a request to return of property. I've reached out to Mr. Hamlin. We anticipate an order being signed to return items that were seized that were not of evidentiary value to Mr. Tellis' family. Secondly, we filed a motion to withdraw. There's not been a breakdown of communications. We've had a very good level of communication and participation from Mr. Tellis and ourselves through the course of this case. We were retained for trial in this matter. Obviously, now the case is going to the next stage. I visited with him yesterday. He's aware of the motion, which we gave a copy of this morning. I know we have a representative from the Public Defender's Office here. Obviously, there's an appeal that's going to be pursued. We want to bring that to court's attention. I would ask that Your Honor grant our motion and set the matter for a status check in a week, confirmation of appellate counsel. And that's I don't believe there'll be an opposition from or an objection from the state in reference to our request.
Okay,
Or from Mr. Tellis.
Someone here from the Public Defender's Office?
Yes, good morning, Your Honor. Colleen Freeman from the Public Defender's Office. We're ready to accept confirm as counsel today. So,
Okay, and is that your desire, Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll grant the motion to withdraw. The public defender is appointed.
thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, so we've got 28 to life. So essentially, the jury said you're going to get 20 to life, but now the judge has tacked on an additional 8 years to the minimum sentence. So he's going to be behind bars for 28 years. I believe he's been in jail now for over a year, probably 2 years. So if we take that 2 years off, he's going to serve an additional 26, and then he'll be eligible for parole. That doesn't mean that he's only going to be in jail for 28 years or 26 more years. It doesn't mean that he's going to be in jail for life. It just means that at a minimum, he's going to be behind bars for the next 26 years of his life, which is a pretty significant amount of time for someone his age. If he gets out at all, he will be a senior citizen at that point. So in answer to your question, Jeff, he was charged with first-degree murder. He was charged with lying in wait, and he was charged with a crime related to killing an older person with intent, felony murder on an older person. So it was 3 crimes that he was charged with, from what I remember, and based on my notes, and he was essentially convicted of all of them, but the sentence, they're kind of interrelated. So he didn't get multiple sentences for those multiple crimes. So unless anybody has any questions about what happened with respect to that, now that we've tied a bow on the entire Robert Tellis case, we're done with it. I can't imagine there are going to be any more hearings or anything that are of import to us. I mean, I'll monitor the appeal if it happens. So far, no appeals have been filed. You saw that they were essentially assigning a public defender to take over until Robert Tellis can hire somebody to take on the appeal. So I doubt that a public defender is going to file the appellate paperwork. It could happen. It has happened, but I would anticipate that he's going to find somebody to represent him, handle the appeal. I'll monitor that. It's probably not going to go anywhere though, people. So I doubt we'll be monitoring that very closely. So moving on. Nicholas Alahverdian. So I don't know if you guys have paid any attention to this Nicholas Alahverdian thing, but Nicholas Alahverdian, who also goes by Nicholas Rossi, is quite the character. Yeah, Jeff, his last lawyer was pretty bad. The lawyer before this guy was terrible. Hopefully he'll get a better attorney. I don't think Draskovic was bad though, if that's who you're referring to. So Nicholas Alahverdian, Nicholas Rossi. Let's talk a little bit about that. So this is Nicholas Alahverdian's obituary. I don't know if you all have been keeping up with this, but this is a pretty interesting case. Let's have a look at his obituary. Now, according to his obituary, he was born on July 11th, 1987, and he passed away on February 29th of 2020. His obituary reads, Nicholas Alahverdian's battle for life ended on February 29th, 2020. Mr. Alahverdian died 2 months after going public with his diagnosis of non-Hodgkin lymphoma. He was in his 32nd year. Now, I want you to recall, commit to memory that he died 2 months after going public with his diagnosis. He was in his 32nd year. At his bedside were Mrs. Alahverdian, their 2 children, and extended family. His last words were, "Fear not, and run toward the bliss of the sun." So he sounds like a pretty articulate guy, pretty good guy. In fact, this entire obituary makes it seem like Nicholas Alahverdian was essentially God's gift to young people who are growing up in foster care. Mr. Alahverdian was a devout Roman Catholic. I want you to remember that as well. He's a devout Roman Catholic. In keeping with Mr. Alahverdian's wishes, his earthly remains were cremated with his ashes scattered at sea. So essentially, if you want to exhume the body and make sure that it is Mr. Alahverdian, you cannot do so because his remains are gone. So this is where we get into some puffery, as it were. Statesmen and stateswomen in the House of Representatives and Senate joined with mayors across Rhode Island in homage to a man whom they acknowledged as one of the most vocal, outspoken, and constructive advocates for reforming Rhode Island's Department of Children, Youth, and Families and the child care system, and a fighter in spirit but a peacemaker in practice for 2 decades. His name, when uttered in memoriam in the House and Senate chambers and city halls throughout the Ocean State, was a fitting tribute, as those were the spaces where Alahverdian labored as a warrior for those without a voice for 2 decades, commenting on not just issues surrounding the Department of Children, Youth, and Families, but also business, health, public safety, and education. This thing goes on and on. It talks about, elected officials who loved him and it talks about the press releases and things of that nature regarding things that he did. I mean, this thing paints him as an amazing person. It goes on. Alahverdian continued his crusade against DCYF abuses until his death. And with merely 2 weeks prior to his untimely passing, a bill creating a DCYF oversight commission was introduced in his honor by Representative Ray Hull, as the stories about DCYF horrors continue to be reported and published. He again did the unthinkable and was admitted to and became an alum of Harvard University, the most peaceful and intellectually invigorating 4 years of his life, aside from the past 4 years with his young, loving family, including his beloved wife and cherished children. So let's go back up to the top here. And he says in this, or I'm sorry, not he, the author of this obituary says that he has 2 children. He's survived by 2 children and a loving wife. Now, so far, his loving wife has yet to surface. We don't know who this person is. So far, the 2 children that he left behind have yet to surface. We don't know who these 2 children are. But that has not stopped claims of his death from coming from this unnamed, as yet unnamed spouse of his. So here's an article from the Providence Journal. This was back in January of 2021. Now, around that time, in January 2021, people were looking for Mr. Alahverdian for reasons that will come to light as we read this. And the Providence Journal and the citizens of Rhode Island had a vested interest in keeping up with this because they had been close to Mr. Alahverdian's life and the goings on with respect to his life, because that's where he was raised and that's where he did his work regarding the Department of Children and Families. So the Providence Journal, of course, was keeping up with Mr. Alahverdian throughout his life and throughout his death, up to and including today. His announced death at 32 came just 2 months after Alahverdian informed reporters at various media outlets that he had late-stage non-Hodgkin lymphoma and had weeks to live. His life as a crusader for children, now about to be cut short, was news that needed reporting, he insisted to a Journal reporter and editor. But Alahverdian was also confronting another powerful force around that time, says Jeffrey Pine, a lawyer who had recently represented him. So a good portion of this particular article is based on an attorney who had represented Nicholas Alahverdian immediately prior to the time that he allegedly contracted or was diagnosed with lymphoma and then allegedly perished. The FBI was looking for him. The agency was looking into a fraud complaint filed against Alahverdian in Ohio, according to Pine. His former foster mother in Ohio, Sharon Lane, tells the Journal that Alahverdian had fraudulently obtained 22 credit cards and loans under her husband's name and ran up debts totaling $200,000. Ohio court records also show Alahverdian's second wife was granted a divorce in 2017 after less than 2 years of marriage, with Alahverdian still owing her $52,000 from a loan. Alahverdian, who Pine says was living in Ireland at the end of 2019, knew of the FBI's interest in him. Alahverdian had told the Journal he was living in an undisclosed country because his child care advocacy from years ago had provoked threats. Okay, so at this point, 2019, according to his attorney, he's living in Ireland. According to the Journal, he had moved to an undisclosed country, perhaps Ireland, because of these threats against him that stemmed from his advocacy with respect to DCF. Now, I can't remember which article it's in, but at some point, so Nicholas Alahverdian was a foster care person. He was raised in foster families, and he was allegedly a victim of these abuses by foster families. And the DCYF was not investigating what was going on in these households. And so he became an advocate for children in foster families. Natalie, good to see you here. You made it. You missed everything with respect to Tellus, but we're here talking about Alahverdian now. Tellus got an additional 8 years added onto his sentence. Will, I tried to make the reading as dramatic as possible. So In 2019, when he's in Ireland, according to his attorney contacts him to ask him directly about the FBI inquiry. An FBI agent had called Alahverdian to discuss the fraud complaint, attorney Pine says. Alahverdian gave Pine the FBI investigator's name, and I contacted the FBI just to confirm that he was being looked at by the FBI. So according to Pine, a former attorney for Alahverdian, in 2019, Alahverdian knew the FBI is coming for you. Okay. So that's where we are in 2019. Now, Pine, who successfully represented Alahverdian against a claim that he failed to register as a sex offender, says the timing of events. Learning about the FBI's inquiry, Alahverdian's sudden announcement of his terminal illness, and then his swift death left questions in his mind. The next thing I know, he gets very, very sick with cancer and dies within weeks. Do I think it's possible he's still alive? Of course I do. This is his attorney saying these things. Okay, so back to his DCYF times. So after he's a victim of the allegedly a victim of DCYF, he apparently racked up some medical bills in Rhode Island. I have no idea what the bills were for, but he sues the DCYF because of these alleged abuses that he faced while he was a child in DCYF. And then he dropped the case later on because, well, he drops the case. I don't know but after the state of Rhode Island makes his $200,000 worth of medical debt disappear. So I'm not saying that was an agreement that they had. I'm not saying it wasn't an agreement that they had, but the medical debt disappears and the case against DCYF drops. So yeah, he's an advocate against DCYF, but when it came time to actually pursue a claim against them that could have, brought them to some sort of justice, he dropped the case. At around the same time, State Police Lieutenant Colonel Kevin Berry says a detective talked to Representative Hall. Now, this is a Rhode Island state representative, as well as other people last summer. Remember, this article was published back in 2021. So last summer. So we're talked to Rep Hall and other people in the summer of 2020. As reports circulated that Alahverdian was still alive, Berry says the state police still had a warrant for him for allegedly failing to register in Rhode Island as a sex offender. Alahverdian was convicted in 2008 on 2 sex-related charges after an encounter in a stairwell with a fellow student at Sinclair Community College in Dayton, Ohio. That's according to court documents. Anytime there's an allegation that someone is still alive and we have an active warrant of someone being a sex offender violator, we are going to take that seriously, according to Berry, the lieutenant colonel. Without definitive evidence that he was deceased, we had to run that down. So now the state police are also looking into whether or not this Nicholas Alahverdian is in fact deceased. Alahverdian's presumptive widow. Now, the presumptive widow is the person who made the announcement that Mr. Alahverdian was dead. She made it on social media posts. And she's also the person who posted the obituary that we just kind of looked over to everloved.com. Now, I can go on everloved.com and post an obituary about myself if I want to. I'm going to just throw that out there as an aside. Take from that what you will. Alahverdian's presumptive widow says all the speculation is disgraceful. In a 5-page email. So she didn't call them. She didn't show up in person or anything like that. In a 5-page email to the Journal, she said, unless my husband was cloned and died in my arms and faked cancer diagnosis, treatment, and heart disease / heart attacks for months before that, he passed away in my arms. The journal is not using her name since she requested anonymity at the time she announced Alahverdian's death, alluding to the same alleged threats that he did. So essentially, when she made the announcements via social media and via press releases that she disseminated to news organizations, she asked that her name be kept private. Now, with her name, you could probably track down where she lives. And based on where she lives, you could probably track down whether or not she is in fact married. You could also probably track down where in fact Mr. Alahverdian allegedly died and, pull a death certificate. That is, if you knew where he died. It's kind of hard to go county by county throughout the country and kind of find out where somebody died. You can't go pulling death certificates in every county throughout the country because it's a lot of work. You can't really do all that. And it's also a lot of money because, you got to get people to do all these things, right? So we don't know who this alleged wife is, but apparently she exists. Allegedly she exists, and she has 2 kids by Nicholas, whose ashes are now at sea. His widow also said her husband has been cremated and his remains scattered at sea. She declined 2 email requests that she release a copy of his death certificate. So not only is she not revealing who she is, she refuses to release a copy of the death certificate, which would only say he's dead and that he died of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. In 2008, police in Dayton, Ohio brought charges against Alahverdian, who then used the last name Rossi, alleging he had sexually assaulted a fellow student in a stairwell at St. Clair Community College, according to court documents. The woman said he groped her and exposed himself. Rossi was found guilty on 1 count of sexual imposition and 1 count of public indecency, according to court records. Rossi filed a motion for a new trial based on newly discovered evidence. The evidence took the form of a MySpace blog. MySpace? Okay. Well, I guess back in 2008, I don't know. Let me know if you all know. Was MySpace a thing back in 2008 or, somewhere around there, 2009, 2010, when this court case probably happened? Took the evidence in the form of a MySpace blog posting allegedly written by the victim, in which she admitted to having lied under oath in an attempt to deflect accusations of cheating and protect her relationship with her boyfriend. But during a February 28, 2011 evidentiary hearing, the state countered Rossi's new evidence claim with testimony of an expert in computer forensics. That sounds familiar. These experts in computer forensics, we saw a lot of those in the Tellis trial. And in the last trial that we did, I forgot the woman's name, but the one who buried her husband in the backyard. The expert testified with 90% certainty that the blog post had been altered or was completely fabricated. He said anyone familiar with the cut, copy, and paste functions of a computer with access to basic computer programs would have the capability to easily alter or fabricate a document, like the MySpace blog post. He also noted a discrepancy between the date of the posting and the corresponding day of the week, a mistake that would not have been made by a computer, but rather only by human error. After the hearing, the judge denied Rossi's motion for a new trial, saying the newly discovered evidence was highly questionable and not credible. Alahverdian's former foster mother says, Nick had the ability to pull the wool over so many people's eyes. When I look back, I can see a pattern, but at the time we were living busy lives. This is where we learned that he took out a loan with his ex-wife of $52,000. Divorce records, this is the last paragraph in this box off section. Divorce records show that Alahverdian persuaded his wife to lend him the money for 1 year, which he claimed he needed to keep the Community Progress Institute afloat temporarily, referring to a community service agency that Alahverdian was involved with. So he took a loan from his wife to keep CPI afloat. And if it's a community service agency, that means it's likely a 501c3. So if he accepted that loan money under false pretenses, then he could also be guilty of a separate federal crime with respect to that. So before we get into fake death fugitives $40,000 celebrity scam, let's talk about what happened after that. So, Mr. Alahverdian, who's dead now, right? He's dead. Mr. Alahverdian allegedly, let's not even go that way. Okay, so there's a guy who lives in Ireland who contracts COVID. He ends up in the hospital. Now, at kind of the same time, the state of Utah apparently has a several years worth of backlogged forcible sexual encounter kits, where they have taken possible DNA evidence from victims of sexual assaults, but they haven't processed it. So they're going through this backlog, and this backlog dates back at least to 2008. In 2008, a female accused Nicholas Alahverdian of having forced himself upon her sexually, submitted the rape kit. It never got processed. Years later, a decade later, they're processing all this backlog stuff, and they find this DNA evidence that matches this guy who was convicted in Ohio of a sexual related offense. So, of course, his DNA evidence is on file. That person is Nicholas Alahverdian. So Utah, once Nicholas Alahverdian issues a warrant for his arrest. Meanwhile, this guy named Sir Arthur Knight lives in Ireland. He contracts COVID, ends up in the hospital. Utah is trying to find Nicholas Alahverdian, and so his picture is all over the internet, right? Everybody's trying to find Nicholas Alahverdian. Like I said, Providence, the Rhode Island newspapers, they're keeping track of what is going on in the life of Nicholas Alahverdian. So not only are Utah newspapers covering this, but you've got Providence newspapers and Rhode Island newspapers covering this. And so there's all of these news outlets that are trying to find what's going on with Nicholas Alahverdian, but you've also got this obituary that nobody can verify, saying that Nicholas Alahverdian is dead. So of course this is now like a big deal in Utah and Providence. So Sir Arthur Knight is in the hospital, and they've got these pictures of this guy circulating around the news media, and he's got tats. He's just tatted on his arms and everything, right? So a nurse at the hospital where Nicholas Alahverdian is being treated says, wait, I've seen those tats before. That's Sir Arthur Knight, this guy that we're treating for COVID. So she contacts the authorities. So after she contacts the authorities, Sir Arthur Knight essentially gets arrested while he's from the hospital. Like, he's leaving the hospital to go to jail in Ireland. So he's going through this process in Ireland, and he's now married to an Irish woman. They are living this life where, according to some people, he's a British person who happens to live in Ireland. And according to other people, he's an Irish person living in Ireland, but he's definitely not an American person living in Ireland. So that's where we're going to pick up, because the Irish courts now have to decide whether to extradite this guy. And there's no extradition requirement between the United States and Ireland that I'm aware of. So, but Utah wants this guy. And the DNA from this test kit in Utah matches this COVID patient over in, apparently matches this COVID patient over in Ireland as well. Now, in addition to the tattoos. So let's pick up from there. And this is an interview that he and his wife did in his home over a year ago. This is while they are in Ireland. So let's have a look at this.
Out on bail, awaiting his next extradition hearing.
Who are you?
I am Arthur Knight, and this is my wife, Miranda Knight. And unfortunately, there are those who would claim differently.
Are you Nicholas Rossi?
No.
Are you
that is
Nicholas
completely
Alahverdian?
insane. Absolutely not.
Are you Nicholas Brown?
Yes.
When asked why he changed his name from Nicholas to Arthur, he replied because it was associated with bad childhood experiences in Northern Ireland.
So this is the first video that we're watching about Nicholas Alahverdian, about Sir Arthur Knight or Nicholas, whoever this is. And he's saying, I am certainly not Nicholas Alahverdian. I'm certainly not Nicholas Rossi. I'm Sir Arthur Knight. Just bear that in mind.
Miranda, who claims she married her husband in Bristol 2 years ago, says she was there when Police Scotland arrested her husband in hospital as he recovered from COVID. Arrivals to court for bail hearings were in a wheelchair. An oxygen mask remained on throughout this interview at their Glasgow home.
I nearly died. I nearly died, and we are terrified. How can I be a...
All right, so she is lifting him out of the chair, as you can see. Bear in mind, apparently, while he was in hospital, and now I'm talking like I'm European. While he was in the hospital, as we say here in the United States, I'm sorry, he got caught in Scotland, not Ireland. While he was in the hospital, apparently he went through 4 comas. Now, I am unaware. I don't know whether those were induced comas, because there were a lot of people during COVID who had to be induced into a coma because they were the breathing tubes that they had to put in. You just couldn't be awake and have that. You couldn't be conscious and have those the type of things going on that COVID induced in some people. So I'm unsure as to whether or not those separate comas were a byproduct of the condition itself, or whether the doctors actually induced those comas. But apparently he did have several comas. Apparently COVID did a number on this guy. That I don't think, I think it's without question that COVID did a number on this guy. But as to whether or not this that we see going on right here is accurate, let's wait and see. We will withhold judgment right now. Just wait for it.
flight risk if I can't even stand?
The electric wheelchair is not a prop. There's no faking of this illness.
This is a case.
All right. If you have to say that the electric wheelchair is not a prop, there's no faking, that's probably a good indication that something you're doing is faking.
Of mistaken identity.
You say you've never been to the United States?
Never in my life.
They claimed in court you were identified from tattoos.
That is not true. there is no evidence whatsoever that there are tattoos, and I've shown that to news reporter after news reporter.
In this interview with a US network, he did agree to roll up one sleeve.
It was up further, right? And have you had any tattoos removed?
The man wanted in America to face a rape charge is known to have multiple tattoos.
He's done quite a masterful job of hiding himself from the law.
Prosecutors in Utah say Nicholas Rossi, also known as Alahverdian, is believed to have used at least 16 different aliases.
16 aliases? No, typos.
These are very serious charges that this man faces. They claim this man faked his own death to evade those charges. Did you fake your own death?
Sharon, we're sitting having a conversation. I've never been dead to anyone.
After so many years, I know him inside out. I know my husband does not have tendencies as a rapist.
He is going to be needing...
All right, so this woman who just married this guy, a year or two before this interview took place, knows that her husband has absolutely no tendencies toward forcing himself on others sexually. Nicholas Alahverdian, however, apparently not only is he wanted in Utah, has he been convicted in Ohio, but apparently there are 4 other states in which women have accused him of doing the thing that this woman says her husband could never do. Just going to throw that out there.
Very large team on the pitch to try to say that I am a rapist, because not only are we terrified because this is a vicious lie, but we are also incredibly disgusted by the fact that we now have to live our lives in a secretive way, because my wife can't even walk down the pavement to get a pint of milk. And it continues.
Some people say you're saying it a secretive way, but you're now speaking to various media outlets, including us. Why? What is the purpose then of this interview?
The truth needs to be known.
A section of this interview was shown to Brian Coogan, who almost adopted a teenage Nicholas Alahverdian. Both were involved in local politics.
So now we're going to hear from 2 people who knew Nicholas Alahverdian before all of this went down.
Politics in Rhode Island, with Alahverdian becoming a critic of the state's child welfare system.
I'm 100% sure that's Nicholas Alahverdian. I will bet $50,000 cash on it, and I'll put the cash up. That is Nicholas Alahverdian. And the more that he says it's not him, and the more that he tries to play a game, the more I want to come to Scotland. I have 5 boys. He's almost like my sixth child. You know when your child's lying to you. I mean, his own stepfather came out and said that's him.
You're sure that's him?
Well, that's my son. There he is, right there. I know my son. I just know my son. That's definitely Nicky. He's older, but it's him.
It's a game of chess that Nick's playing. At the end, he's going to be checkmate out. Guaranteed.
The case returns to court for the next stage of extradition proceedings in April and May, when the prosecution say the issue of identity will be resolved. Sharon Frew.
All right, so that's one video. That video is just to give you a glimpse of what Nicholas Alahverdian was saying 2 years ago. I'm sorry, what Sir Arthur Knight was saying 2 years ago. Regarding his identity, his country of origin, because remember he said in this video, I've never even been to the United States. Regarding so many things about his life. But it didn't stop there. It didn't stop there, or by any stretch of the imagination. He continued this for multiple interviews. This is probably the best interview that he has that I have seen. This interview is amazing. Let me see if I can get this pulled up for you.
We were once a normal family, but thanks to the media, our lives have been interrupted. And we'd like privacy, and I would like to get back to being a normal husband. But I can't, because I can't breathe. I can't walk. People say that's an act. Let me try to stand up. Let me try to stand up. Exactly. Exactly.
What do you say to some?
I gotta I gotta replay that for you.
Can't breathe. I can't walk. People say that's an act. Let me try to stand up. Let me try to stand up. Exactly. Exactly.
What do you say to someone who believes that you are Nicholas Alahverdian?
I am not, Andrea. I am not Nicholas Alahverdian. I do not know how to make this clearer.
What do you say to people who say these are crocodile tears? He's putting on a show. This is all an act.
Oh,
Andrea,
no,
that's a low blow. That's a right low blow.
So yeah, that's the guy that we're dealing with here, that Utah courts have to deal with now. Now, regardless of who this guy is, this is the guy that Utah courts have to deal with. This guy who just apparently tried to stand up, but it was a lot more clear in this particular video that he wasn't really trying to stand up, and that his wife really didn't have to catch him, in my opinion. But that's just me. So, in his eventually, the Scottish court said, "All right, look, you're full of it, and we're not going to stand by and let you continue this charade, at least here in Scotland. Now, if you want to go over to the United States and give them a show, have at it. But we're sending you there. We're sending you where we think you came from. We're sending you there." In his first court appearance in Utah, everything just went bananas, because the judge is faced with a guy who says, "I'm not the guy that you think that I am, so I really can't answer the questions that you have for me, because I'm not him. And we can't even get this hearing started because I'm not the guy that you're looking for." It eventually, it's a 5-minute ordeal. We're only going to watch the first half of it, because eventually the judge was just had enough and said, "Here's what's about to happen." So we don't need to pay attention to that. But let's the beginning is awesome, because now everything he says is a matter of the record. What he's saying to people in interviews is one thing, but he's talking to a court now. Let's see what he has to say to the court.
Number 36, State versus Rossi, 6768. Are you Mr. Rossi? Are you Mr. Rossi?
You might have to take that off just to talk so she can hear you.
Is that a yes? I'm having a hard time.
My name is Olga. Now you pray.
I think I'm going to have the jail restate what he said. Having a really hard time hearing him.
My name is Olga. Wait, pray. He says his name is Arthur Knight. Brown? Arthur Knight Brown.
I can't hear. You want to have him state his name and date of birth?
Yeah, we can't hear him at all. Can you ask him? Can you please state your name and date of birth?
Hey, get a little closer.
Lady, my name is Arthur Knight Brown. My date of birth is 22nd of the 11th, 1986.
All right. So we're dealing with one Arthur Knight Brown, who was born in 1986. That's who was in court in Utah. Arthur Knight Brown, 1986. Nicholas Alahverdian, we know, was born July 11th, 1987, according to his obituary. So this can't be Nicholas Alahverdian.
Having a problem with understanding who this person is.
This is not number 36.
Your Honor, we've got him as.
The court is confused because they're like, wait a minute. I'm supposed to be here dealing with Nicholas Rossi. Who is this Arthur Knight Brown character that you all have on the camera? I can't go forward with Arthur Knight Brown. That must be somebody I've got later. I'm supposed to be dealing. Where is Nicholas Rossi? That's who I'm here for.
Nicholas Rossi, but he's saying his name is Arthur Knight Brown.
Oh, that's one of the AKAs, it looks like.
What's your birthday?
We're having a really is it July 11th, 1987?
No, my lady, it's 22nd of November, 1986.
She just asked him, is your date of birth July 11th, 1987? You know, the date of birth that's on Nicholas Rossi's obituary, that date. He's saying, no, it's not that. Not that at all.
22nd of November, 1986.
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, Tamara Vasquez for the state. This individual has been extradited, and he has not admitted his name or birth date accurately, and so I don't think we're going to be successful on that today either. It's also known as.
Objection, my lady. That is complete hearsay, and I would ask your ladyship that.
Objection, my lady. I would ask your ladyship. He's full European mode at this point.
The prosecution to cause for why they proceeded to
so Mr. Knight, I'm going to,
whilst I had an appeal pending in the Supreme Court.
Mr. Knight, I'm going to appoint a lawyer for you. There's a no bail warrant in this case, so we're going to set it for a detention hearing in 10 days. And
So, like I said, eventually the court just kind of took charge here and said, nah, I'm not dealing with any more of this because this is foolishness. At this point, we're just going to go ahead and set this thing for the next hearing. And you can figure it out at that point. Figure out who you are and all of that later on. Because this is complete and utter foolishness what you got going on in this particular court. So that is multiple videos where he is claiming that he's not who the court says that he is. He's claiming that he is not Nicholas Alahverdian, and that he is in fact this other guy. So what's going on now? Because, all right, look, at this point, let's look at a couple of other articles that we've got, because they're going to kind of shed some light on who this guy is. They're kind of going to add some character to who this Nicholas Alahverdian person is. Maybe not this Knight Brown character, Brown Knight character, whoever he is, but it'll kind of tell us who Nicholas Alahverdian is, a little bit more about him. So here we go, right? This is the one you all already saw a little bit. Fake death fugitives, $40,000 celebrity scam. Last year, he and his wife Miranda moved from Bristol to Glasgow, where neighbors said he posed as an English gentleman and academic. Now, this is Nicholas Alahverdian slash Arthur Knight Brown, whoever. We really don't know who this article is talking about because he keeps using this person that's in court keeps using different names. Alahverdian had previously used a fake Irish accent and posed as a marketing expert to trick a Canadian star into handing over $40,000, according to the Sunday Mail. Nafsika Antipas, a vegan food and lifestyle writer and TV host, was persuaded by Alahverdian to let him get involved in her successful international food business, which she wanted to expand to the UK. Antipas, 44, who runs the Nafisca's Garden brand, knew him as Nicholas Knight Brown. Nicholas Knight Brown, not Arthur Knight Brown, Nicholas Knight Brown, and said he had no idea he was a sex offender and fraudster wanted by the FBI. Using her company, he set himself up with a $100,000 a year salary. The relationship deteriorated when Antipas began asking why she had spent $40,000 on 4 months' work and seen no results. She said he then bombarded her with abuse. The last she heard from Alahverdian was when a lawyer's letter arrived at her home in Canada in June 2020, threatening court action over $70,000 in unpaid wages. In response, her lawyer demanded the $40,000 Alahverdian had already been paid, saying that he had failed to do the work he had promised, and demanded compensation for the abuse Antipas had suffered. She heard nothing else after that. If I were a betting man, I'd say Alahverdian probably posed as an attorney and sent a letter to Miss Antipas on what looked to be attorney letterhead, but probably never hired an attorney. And this goes on to talk about the various allegations against Nicholas Alahverdian that we kind of already know about. This is an article from January of this year. And he's still denying his identity in court. And this is, what we just saw. When the prosecutor who claimed Alahverdian went by at least 10 aliases told the court that Alahverdian had denied his true name and birth date since his extradition to Utah earlier this month for charges stemming from a 2008 forcible sexual assault, Alahverdian interrupted the Associated Press reports. Objection, my lady. That is complete hearsay. About a decade after the alleged rape of a 21-year-old woman in Orem, Utah, Alahverdian was named as a suspect when the Utah State Crime Lab, pushing through a backlog of DNA test kits, allegedly identified his genetic material on the test. So that's what I was talking about when I said, look, this is all stemming from Utah having decided that it was going to process these test kits. And I believe they got federal funds to go through these test kits that they had backlogged. And apparently this is a problem in several states. It ain't just Utah where there's these rape test kits that aren't being processed. So ostensibly there's a bunch of people who are out, and even prior sex offenders who are out having committed other sexual abuse crimes that these test kits could point toward as being a repeat offender, and we're not finding them because these test kits aren't being run. So that in itself is a problem. But again, this is the guy that we're dealing with, right? So he had another hearing yesterday, and the hearing yesterday was not televised. So I don't have the full hearing for you, but the hearing is notable because of what Mr. Arthur Knight Brown kind of said at the hearing regarding his identity. So we're going to have a look at that particular hearing, the news report from that particular hearing, just to see kind of what he had to say. So here we go.
Change of events. Nicholas Rossi, the man accused of fleeing the country, faking his own death to get out of assault charges, has admitted to changing his name several times and using more than one alias.
ABC4's Annika Johns joins us live with more from the evidentiary hearing held today in Utah County. Annika, what can you tell us?
Well, so for years, Nicholas Rossi has been using the name Arthur Knight, claiming he's being mistaken as the man that is accused of rape. However, today in court, he did claim that he has used multiple names in the past and did leave the country. However, instead of leaving the country to not face legal action, he is saying he left because his life was in danger.
So he's changed his entire story. He left the country, but he left the country because he was in danger for his life. Now, he's been telling reporter after reporter after reporter after reporter, I'm not that guy. He went and told the court, I'm not that guy. And that's while he was in jail. He was in jail in Utah, where these people who are somehow coming after him because of his fight against the Rhode Island DCYF could not have gotten to him. And he's telling the court, I'm not that guy. But now he's that guy.
State of Utah versus Rossi.
Nicholas Rossi, the man accused of fleeing the country and faking his own death to get out of multiple rape charges, is back in court, this time to determine whether or not he can be released on bail.
Do you need the hearing?
Yes, Judge.
Rossi is accused of fleeing the United States after being named a suspect in a 2008 rape case in Orem. Earlier this year, Rossi, whose legal name is Nicholas Alahverdian, was extradited from Scotland, despite years of claiming he was not Nicholas Rossi. For years, he's claimed he's an Irish orphan framed by authorities named Arthur Knight. However, today, under oath,
he's an Irish orphan. Not only is he an Irish orphan, but do you see what he's wearing? He has also been photographed in a yarmulke and apparently what is traditional Jewish attire, aside from just the yarmulke, and claim that he had to do that because he is Orthodox Jew, even though his obituary says that he's Roman Catholic. Remember I said that was going to come back up? That's the reason he's covering his head in this particular photo, because he is Jewish at this point in his life, but he's also Roman Catholic, but only when he's Nicholas Rossi. When he is Sir Arthur Knight Brown, he is definitely Jewish.
Rossi admitted to using a number of aliases, including Arthur Knight, but claimed the reason behind the name changes was because there was a number of threats made against him and his family.
I made a further decision to be, once again, change my name legally to avoid the dangerous situation.
These threats, Rossi say, stem from his previous work in child services. However, when asked who made the threat, he refused to answer, claiming the assailants could still go after him.
You moved to the United Kingdom and you changed your name to protect yourself from the credible and substantiated threats from people inside of the Rhode Island state government.
I don't want to give a mouse cheese.
What would giving their names, how would that give a mouse cheese?
Meaning it would stoke the fire.
The state argued Rossi is a probable flight risk, saying he has no ties to Utah, a place to live, and in the past has obtained a fake ID and could do it again. However, the defense argued Rossi is not a flight risk, especially in his current health condition.
That just pointing to the fact that he's not confined to a wheelchair is going to make it really, really difficult for somebody to be a flight risk.
Judge Poland ruled in favor of the state, saying Rossi will be held without bail.
For all of these reasons, the court finds that the state has met its burden of proof. I will.
So we don't need to watch any more of this, but you guys get the idea. He has now admitted who he is to the court. And in doing so, he said, look, the reason that I had to change my name and flee the country, and the reason that I've been lying all this time is because these people, they out to get me. And it's people in the Rhode Island state government. And then he says to the court, his defense team says, but you should let him out on bail because he's confined to a wheelchair. So he's not really a flight risk because apparently they don't let wheelchairs on planes anymore. I don't know, but he's not a flight risk. The judge says, well, yeah, but he has no ties to Utah. So I don't have any reason to believe that he's going to stay in Utah. But the judge also says, plus, these people are out to get him, right? So if they're out to get him, the safest place for him is in jail, right? So let's just keep him there so that he's safe. So he kind of shot himself in the foot with respect to that particular argument. So yeah, Tread, this Joker is something else. I also noticed while he was talking in court today, or yesterday, I'm sorry, that he had an accent. This Joker been in Europe for what, 2 years, 3 years? And then he came back. He was extradited to the United States. And he's got a full-blown British or Scottish or Irish or some kind of accent. It depends on who he's talking to and where he is. Because remember when he was talking to the Canadian lady, he had an Irish accent. I don't know what particular accent that was, but it ain't American. So even when he admits to the court that he's Nicholas Rossi from Rhode Island, he still has a foreign accent. So they have not decided when trial is going to be in this particular case, but we're going to keep tabs on this guy just because I find this supremely interesting. I'm wondering if there are going to be additional charges filed against him in other states, and whether he's going to be one of these guys that's going to get convicted in one state and then have to go to another state to face trial there, and then go to another state and face. That could be the case with respect to this guy. He could also face several civil cases because apparently he has this loan to his ex-wife. He's got, the $200,000 that he basically stole from his stepfather. And then the civil cases that could stem from the multiple allegations of sexual assault. So he could be facing a lot at this point in his life. And I don't think that we've seen this is going to be the end of it, but we will keep watch. Now, there are some other cases that are going on right now. There's, this lady whose boyfriend died when he was trapped in a suitcase here in Florida. That trial is starting tomorrow. I'm considering going on with that. So stay tuned to the channel. I'm not going to be able to do that like I've done other trials. If I am able to do it, I'm not going to be able to do it like I did other trials where I'm going to be able to be on the entire day for the trial because I have other work that has to be done over the next couple weeks. But if I am able to do it, I'm going to come on in the evening time or late afternoon, early evening, and kind of recap the important parts of that day's trial. So stay tuned if you are at all interested in that case, because we will likely be doing something with respect to that. But I do appreciate you all joining me for this and getting these updates. I'm glad we were able to put the Tellis trial to bed. And glad we were able to finally find out who Sir Arthur Knight is, and that he is, in fact, Nicholas Alahverdian. Without further ado, I bid you all good night. Jeff wants to know if he has more accents than Hi, Jeff. I don't know, Jeff. I don't know. I would venture to say yes, but I can put on 1,000 accents. They'll probably all be terrible, but I'll have put them on. But without further ado, good night. Tread, again, good to see you here. Jeff, thanks for coming. For everybody else, thank you, and good night.